Breaking news, Raider Nation. The silver and black just gave us something to talk about, and trust me, you don't want to miss this. Today, we're diving deep into the Las Vegas Raiders matchup against the Arizona Cardinals, and what we saw on that field told us a lot about who deserves a roster spot and who might be packing their bags soon. Now, here's the shocker. Vegas rolled out their first team offense and defense, at least for one drive. I didn't expect that, but man, they came out firing. The offense wasted no time marching down the field and punching it in for a touchdown. Sure, it was against backups, but the execution still matters, and it showed us something big. But hold on a second, before we jump into the latest Raider news, make sure you subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and smash the bell icon so you never miss a breaking update. Alright, let's get back into it. On the opening series, things didn't look great at first. A short run, then an incompletion, suddenly it's 3rd and 9, and it feels like the Raiders might stall out. But then, Gino Smith trusted his guy, Dante Thornton. Despite tight coverage, despite being held, Thornton fought through, made the play, and moved the chains. That single moment spoke volumes. Gino's trust in Thornton is growing fast, and honestly, it looks like he believes in him more than any other wideout right now. Call me bold, but if this continues, Thornton could end up being the Raiders' true #1 receiver this season, the guy Gino leans on, the one getting the bulk of the targets. And it's not just one game. We've seen it across the preseason. Deep shots, critical plays, big opportunities. It's all pointing toward Thornton becoming a breakout star in silver and black. And let's not forget the ground game. On 1st and 10, the Raiders ran an outside zone to the right, and the offensive line just bulldozed the Cardinals. The movement up front was textbook, guards, tackles, everyone working in sync. Plays like that are exactly what this offense needs to build consistency. When you really break down the film, one thing becomes obvious. Kolton Miller isn't just solid, he's one of the best run-blocking tackles in the entire league. Play after play, he just buries defenders, and it's not only about raw strength, his awareness and timing make the difference. Watch closely, and you'll see it too. After that first burst from Ashton Genty, the rookie's day was done. Only 2 carries, but both came on zone looks, designed to test vision and patience. Then came Zamir White. His opportunities looked completely different. Instead of zone, the Raiders dialed up power, pulling guards, downhill blocking, moving bodies, exactly the kind of physical football that sets the tone. White ripped off 2 impressive runs, picking up tough yards and a fresh set of downs. And then came the highlight. 1st and 10. Gino Smith takes the snap, scans right, nothing. Checks the middle, still covered. Glances left, no opening. Most quarterbacks panic there. Gino didn't. He spun out, bought time, and gave Michael Mayer a chance. The rookie tight end recognized it instantly, broke off his route, and Gino lofted it high. A true 50-50 ball, and Mayer went up and won it. That's the type of play that changes drives and seasons. It reminded me of the difference between quarterbacks who just run the play versus those who create one. Derek Carr, for years, struggled when the first read wasn't there. That's where drives died. But Gino, he's showing he can extend plays and make something out of nothing. Look at the league's elite, Patrick Mahomes being the obvious example. Just the other night against Chicago, he shredded a starting defense by improvising. A 17-yard scramble here, a 25-yard strike there, and even a deep 58-yard bomb. That's the secret sauce. The NFL isn't about perfect play calls, it's about quarterbacks who can turn chaos into opportunity. And for the Raiders, the fact that Gino Smith is showing flashes of that ability should excite every fan. It's been missing for a long time. Now let's be clear, Gino Smith isn't Patrick Mahomes. But here's the thing, you don't have to be Mahomes to run an efficient, dangerous offense. What matters is whether you can extend plays, trust your receivers, and give your team a chance when the first read isn't there. And on that drive, Gino showed exactly that. After picking up some quick yards, Vegas faced a 2nd and 4. Gino dropped back, and without hesitation, he fired a jump ball to Dante Thornton. The timing was wild. Thornton hadn't even fully turned his head yet. But Gino trusted his guy, and that trust paid off. Thornton, towering at 6'5", was lined up against rookie corner Denzel Burke, who's barely 5'10". The size mismatch was obvious, and Thornton made it look almost unfair. He didn't even have to fully extend, just plucked the ball right over Burke's head like a rebound in basketball. Plays like that don't just move the chains, they send a message. This connection is real. Now, Thornton isn't a polished superstar yet. He's raw. His routes need refinement. His hands can still betray him at times, and he's not exactly the most dangerous after the catch. But here's what stands out. Gino believes in him. That kind of trust from a quarterback can fast-track a young receiver's growth. If Thornton keeps sharpening his game, he has every tool to become a long-term difference maker in silver and black. Switching over to the other side of the ball, the Raiders' first-team defense also took the field. And the contrast from earlier in the preseason was striking. Remember that opener against Seattle? The Seahawks' starters drove on them with ease, multiple long series, including a near touchdown that only ended thanks to a timely interception. It was a shaky look for the defense back then. But against Arizona, even if it was mostly Cardinals backups, the Raiders' defense looked sharper, faster, and more disciplined. That's what 3 full weeks of padded practices will do. Line was quicker off the snap, the coverage tighter, the recognition cleaner. You could feel the unit starting to click. What stood out most was the personnel. On the opening snap, the Raiders came out in base defense, no Malcolm Coons, no Tyree Wilson. Instead, they stacked the line with 3 defensive tackles, a heavier look built to dominate up front. And right away, Adam Butler tipped a pass at the line for an incompletion, setting the tone for the drive. It was physical, it was aggressive, and it looked like the defense is beginning to find its identity. The Raiders opened in base defense, but it wasn't the alignment that caught my eye, it was the personnel. With Jeremy Chin sidelined, veteran Terrell Edmonds stepped into that hybrid big nickel role, essentially playing down in the box as an extra linebacker. Seeing Edmonds handle those responsibilities was interesting, especially since that's usually Chin's territory. Alongside him, we had Darian Porter and Eric Scott starting at corner, while Isaiah Polamau took the deep safety spot. On second down, it was time for some classic Max Crosby chaos. Arizona tried to test him with a pin and pull run concept, sending a wide receiver crashing down to block him. But let's be honest, you're not sealing off Crosby with a backup receiver. Too quick, too long, too relentless. He blew it up instantly, forcing a massive loss. That's back-to-back weeks now where offenses have tried that design against him, and it simply does not work. By third and long, Arizona dialed up a screen to salvage the drive, but Adam Butler read it like a book. He bulldozed the lineman in front of him, sniffed it out, and forced the quarterback into a busted play. Jermaine Pratt then came downhill in a hurry, cleaning it up and smothering the back. What stood out wasn't just the stop itself, it was the swarm. Raiders defenders sprinting to the football, all 11 locked in. That's the kind of high-effort culture winning defenses are built on. Remember, Max Crosby didn't become elite overnight. Early in his career, it was effort that carried him, chasing plays down from the backside, finishing reps long after others had given up. Now I'm seeing that same trait spreading across this defense. By the second drive, most of the starters had rotated out, but there were still plenty of names worth watching. Malcolm Coons stayed on for a few more snaps. Tyree Wilson played nearly the entire first half, and Jonah Tavai was also active. On a 3rd and 5, Coons delivered the highlight, beating the left tackle clean and burying the quarterback for a sack. A textbook rep and a reminder of just how dangerous he can be when he gets that edge. Rather than dig into every backup quarterback series, this is where things get fun, because it's time to talk about the individuals making real noise this preseason. Let's start with Malcolm Coons, because if there was one defender who stood out, it was him. He only logged 14 snaps, but I rewatched every single one, and the tape was impressive. No, it didn't always end in a sack. Sometimes the quarterback got the ball out quickly, sometimes the play rolled away from him, but snap after snap, Coons was winning his matchups. Out of those 14 plays, I'd say he maybe lost 2, and even then, they weren't disasters, just moments where he didn't quite finish. What jumped off the screen was his technique. That single-hand swipe he used to beat the left tackle. He's been perfecting that move. We saw glimpses of it in the past against Rashawn Slater, but now it looks polished, sharp, and consistent. Yesterday, he used it multiple times to collapse pockets and force pressure. Add in a couple of strong run-stopping reps where he either held his gap or made the tackle, and you've got the picture of a player rounding into form. That's no small thing either. Coming off a knee injury, regaining confidence in your body takes time. But Coons is showing he still has the juice, and if he keeps building, he could absolutely reclaim his spot as the Raiders' second-best edge presence behind Max Crosby. For a defense desperate for consistent pass rush, that's huge. Now on the other side, Tyree Wilson remains one of the most fascinating players to evaluate. He played 24 snaps, essentially the entire first half, and when it comes to the run game, he's as good as advertised. Big, strong, powerful, and relentless. You can try to block him with a tight end, but it's a mismatch. He sheds it and swallows the play. His physical traits make him a natural run defender, and he delivered again in that area. But the concern is the same as it's always been: pass rush. Wilson still doesn't have a developed plan when rushing the quarterback. Too often, he locks onto the tackle, pushes, and stalls out. Even against backup linemen, there just wasn't much impact. And that's where the contrast shows, because when Andre Carter got his chances, even against third stringers, he flashed more disruption as a pass rusher than Wilson did. Don't get me wrong, Wilson's size and power are rare. His floor as a run defender is solid. But in today's NFL, it's the guys who can hunt quarterbacks that change games. And right now, Wilson has to prove he can be more than just a big body setting the edge. Let's be real here, pass rushers change games, and that's where Andre Carter separates himself. He might only be in his third year with limited snaps under his belt, but every time he's on the field, you see the upside. Yesterday was just more proof: 2 sacks, constant pressure, and an energy off the edge that Tyree Wilson simply hasn't shown yet. And this is the reality in a division where you're facing Patrick Mahomes, Justin Herbert, and now a rising talent like Bo Nix. You don't survive with just solid run defense. You need defenders who can flip the field in one play, guys who can turn a third and long into a punt because they got home. That's why Carter's explosiveness and quick change of direction make him so valuable. Wilson struggles when he has to redirect on bootlegs and chase mobile quarterbacks. Carter thrives in those exact situations. Among all the younger guys fighting for spots, the Lindenbergs, the Eichenbergs, the Vances, Carter is the one who's demanded attention. To me, he's earned his place on this roster without question. Charles Snowden deserves mention too. He's raw, but he's long, athletic, and you can see the growth. At worst, he should be the 5th guy in that rotation, ready to step in if injuries hit. Another standout, Tonka Hemingway. He's only a rookie, but man, he made noise yesterday. 2 quarterback hits, 4 pressures, and a handful of really strong reps against both the run and pass. Not all of those plays were highlight reel material, but the flashes were real. You can see the foundation of a guy who could become a core piece for this defensive line. With veterans like Butler aging out, Hemingway feels like the future. Give him a year or two, and I wouldn't be surprised if he's the most impactful defensive tackle on this roster, unless the Raiders go all in on a first-rounder. And let's not overlook the rest. Greedy Vance came up with a big sack on a design blitz, Cody Lindenberg flew around with energy, and even Court Miller had moments where he stood out. These are the kinds of depth performances that win you roster spots in August and show you who might become important contributors in November. When you look at Greedy Vance, you see flashes of what he could become. He fought through a tough block to grab a sack, and even added a pressure on another play. Now don't get me wrong, he's not fully polished yet. His coverage still needs work, and I don't see him as a roster lock. But a spot on the practice squad, that feels very realistic. Same with Cody Lindenberg. He wasn't perfect, but when you're flying around making 5 or 6 tackles in one game, that tells me you've got instincts worth developing. Now shifting to the offensive line, the Raiders starters seem pretty much set. Colton Miller is still that dominant run blocker you can lean on, and Alex Kappa got some work in. He didn't blow me away, but considering he just got back into pads, I'll give him some slack. What didn't sit right with me was Thayer Munford. He was one of the guys I highlighted as needing a strong preseason, and instead, he looked flat. Across 122 snaps, I counted close to 30 reps where he just flat out lost. Not double teams, not blown assignments, just straight up beaten by the guy across from him. That's a big concern. And here's the real issue. Who's the Raiders' third tackle? Don Wagner, too stiff, not quick enough. Charles Grant, raw, but he's the guy the Raiders want to develop. And Munford, after that showing, it's hard to trust him. Honestly, if I'm making the call, I'd rather roll with Charles Grant. Sometimes the only way to grow is to get thrown into the fire and take your lumps. We saw it with Colton Miller. He got worked his first 2 seasons, but now look at him. If the Raiders believe in Grant long term, maybe it's time to throw him out there and let him learn the hard way. That's the tricky part with Charles Grant. Yes, you can chip to help him, but what happens if he's in for Colton Miller and DJ Glaze is starting on the other side? You can't give both tackles extra help on every snap. At some point, one of them is on an island, and defenses know how to exploit that. Still, I think the Raiders are leaning toward keeping Grant as their swing tackle. Dalton Wagner or even Thayer Munford could land on the practice squad, but if Munford gets released, don't be surprised if another team snatches him up. Experience still carries weight, and a guy with over 2,000 NFL snaps won't stay unemployed for long. Now, shifting to the backfield, Zamir White and Raheem Mostert both needed to show they could be that reliable RB2 option. And honestly, they answered the call, but in very different ways. Mostert is exactly who he's always been, a pure zone runner. If the line blocks it for 8 yards, he'll get you 8. If it's only there for 2, he's taking 2. He's not going to break tackles or create magic out of thin air. At this stage in his career, that's just who he is. Zamir White, on the other hand, looked sharper, stronger, more decisive. He's a one-cut, downhill runner who can put his pads down and consistently get 4 or 5 tough yards. That might not sound flashy, but it's the kind of reliability you need when the playbook doesn't have 2 explosive backs like Miami or San Francisco. And that's where the Raiders' offense makes up the difference. They don't have a backfield full of fireworks, but they do have Ashton Genty bringing juice, plus weapons like Michael Mayer, Jacoby Myers, Davante Adams, and Brock Bowers to keep defenses honest. Sprinkle in a few jet sweeps, some motion, maybe a creative screen or 2, and suddenly you don't need a pair of home run hitters at running back. You just need steady production. White and Mostert gave a glimpse of that yesterday, and for this season that might be enough. The Raiders look solid enough at running back for now, but the real focus shifts to what's just around the corner. Preseason is behind us, final cuts are looming, and in just 2 weeks, it's go time for the regular season. By Tuesday afternoon, the roster will be trimmed down, and while some cuts may come early, there's no doubt the Raiders already know which players won't be part of the final 53. The big curveball, though, is Aiden O'Connell. With that wrist injury sidelining him for 6 to 8 weeks, he's headed to injured reserve after making the initial roster. That leaves Gino Smith and Cam Miller as the 2 healthy quarterbacks heading into Week 1. And while Tommy Mellott isn't a traditional QB, he could serve as that emergency third option, the kind of player you can stick in to run a handful of plays if disaster ever struck. Realistically, if both quarterbacks go down, you're not winning that game anyway, but depth still matters. That's why I wouldn't be surprised if the Raiders add another arm before the season kicks off. Options are out there. Carter Bradley spent a cup of coffee with the Raiders before landing with San Francisco. If the 49ers move on from him, he could be a familiar face to bring back. The Browns, on the other hand, are overloaded at quarterback. With Deshaun Watson, Kenny Pickett, 2 rookies, and Joe Flacco all in the mix, at least one of those guys won't survive final cuts. If Shiloh Sanders shakes free, or even if Pickett surprisingly becomes available, Las Vegas could take a serious look. Bottom line, don't be shocked if another quarterback joins this roster soon. The Raiders need stability in that room, and as we edge closer to Week 1, every move counts.